All right, we are live. How is everybody doing today? We have quite the list of news to go through. Some repeated news from yesterday as well that I want to cover again very briefly, but let's get into it. Let's waste no time here. Russia fires intercontinental ballistic missile in attack on Ukraine, Kiev says. Still have not figured out how to pronounce it. Ukraine claims Russia fired ICBM at Dnipro, however you pronounce that city in Ukraine. We keep going here. It just seems to get weirder and weirder. This is from CNN. Ukraine's military has accused Russia of firing an ICBM into its territory for the first time, marking what would be another significant escalation in the 1,000-day-old war. Despite Kyiv's accusations, two Western officials said that the missile launched by Russia was a ballistic missile, but not a intercontinental ballistic missile. The Kremlin has declined to comment on the matter. We then get another thing here from the EU saying that this would be a clear escalation. We have another thing here from the NDTV world. Russia's firing of the ICBM on Ukraine is weapons first combat use in history. And then we have this article. Putin says Russia hit Ukraine with new intermediate range ballistic missiles. So what actually is it? Is it an ICBM? Is it this brand new variant of missile that Putin is claiming? But no, CNN just claimed that the Kremlin denied any matter into this and didn't want to speak about it. We then get this video here. In a theatrical presentation likely designed to strike fear into the hearts of naive Western politicians, in effort to tie, this is from the Kyiv Post, by the way, in effort to tie Putin himself to last night's ICBM strike on Ukraine. This is what they're claiming. Russia Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova allegedly receives a call from higher-ups in the middle of a press briefing advising her to avoid commenting on the event. We skip a little bit ahead here. There are subtitles that you can pay attention to.
Алло. Да, у меня брифинг.
So if we just play this back here. Hello, yes, I'm in the middle of a briefing. Whether this is true or not is one thing completely. I have no idea. We're getting a lot of what I would like to say random information that's not adding up, right? For example, CNN said that the Kremlin didn't want to speak on this matter, but we just had an article saying that Putin said it was a intermediate range missile. Now we have this video. Hello, yes, I'm in the middle of the briefing. Do not comment at all on the ballistic missile strike on however you pronounce that city. I'm not even going to attempt to. Southern Machine Building Plant, as the Westerners started talking about it. So she says, yes, okay, thank you. This is in the middle of a massive press conference or briefing on the situation going on. I have no actual clue what's going on. There's, like I said, a lot of random information that is not adding up. Or when you try to make a connection from one thing to another, you're sitting there going, well, kind of contradicting themselves, aren't they? I don't know. We don't have a lot of what I would say solid, good information. I don't want to say disinformation, but I don't know yet. We don't have solid evidence of what exactly is going on. A lot of sides telling a lot of different stories. Speaking of a story here, Randy out of cabinet after shifting claims about indigenous heritage. This is the guy who claimed he had some sort of indigenous background and that he was part native. And let's just say he lied through his teeth over and over and over again during question period. He was questioned numerous times to tell the truth, just to give the actual information out. Was he the real Randy? Who is the other Randy? Where did the money go? Why did he lie about being indigenous? I don't know, but he is apparently gone. And he's going to be out of cabinet to focus on clearing the allegations, Trudeau announces. This just makes me think that he'll be back. He'll be back. Just give it a few months and Randy will... I don't know if he'll return to his seat, but there was a comment from Yo So Fat on the video yesterday saying that he'll most likely still be working in the background. I don't know. I need to take a sip of water. Sip of water for the working man. This is clearly just Trudeau trying to sweep more stuff under the rug. Typical stuff from him. Let's take a look at the Conservatives and what they had to say about the controversy.
Mr. Barrett, on Randy Boissonneau, Global News is reporting that Edmonton police
La
are
liberté
investigating his
d'expression,
company
caucus
and his former
conservateur,
business
est-ce que vous en
partner. Do you have any
voulez
response to that?
Well, look, Randy Boissonneau has been proven to be a fraud. He has no business serving in cabinet. He needs to resign immediately. It's disappointing but not surprising that Justin Trudeau hasn't fired him. Look, this is a cabinet minister who operated a business from the cabinet table. We know that Randy Boissonneau said one thing, but the opposite has been proven true through text messages. We know that his company, well, he had a 50% stake in it, was bidding on government contracts, like the one that they received from Canada Post. We know that his company was applying for contracts claiming to be 100% Indigenous owned when Randy Boissonneau himself has said that that's not the case, that he was falsely claiming to have been Indigenous, thereby disenfranchising and disadvantaging Indigenous-owned businesses. So this is who Justin Trudeau is deciding to keep in his cabinet. It's absolutely unacceptable. And now with new revelations, it's not just fraud cases that are before the courts. Now there is a criminal investigation by the Edmonton Police Service. But Justin Trudeau yesterday professed his continued confidence. I do have that question for some of the ministers. Yesterday we asked Indigenous Services Minister Patty Hajdu, and she offered no defense of Randy Boissonneau and said it was in fact problematic, the conduct that he had engaged in. So some deep reflection is needed by the Prime Minister and by the Liberal caucus on why it is that Randy Boissonneau is being permitted to stay in their cabinet and I would say to stay in their caucus.
What do you make of the fact that
And there you have it. Yes, big bad Randy has he's gotten the boot here. We take a look at this video.
If their goal is to shut down government and shut down programs.
look, we are working towards that happening. The fact of the matter is that we tabled those estimates on Monday. They're now following the normal process where they're going to be looked at committee. And we look forward to seeing how this plays out. I continue to have really positive conversations and constructive conversations with my counterparts in other parties.
Look, I know most of us probably don't want to listen to Karina, so I'll do us all a little favor here and skip ahead. I just want to know what some of the Liberals have to say about this entire controversy. They're probably just going to be running a big defense campaign for Randy.
Milliards de dollars pour les forces armées canadiennes.
And if it's in French, I'm not going to be able to understand it, so...
Toujours des options right, is definitely at risk. Support for the Canadian Armed Forces, $3 billion. Support for Ukraine, and we just passed the 1,000-day mark in Ukraine.
Okay, this has nothing to do with Randy, so I don't know what they were talking about there. Trudeau, whose government banned TikTok from operating offices in Canada, appears on TikTok. You can't make up this insanity. Look, I don't care. Ban TikTok, don't ban TikTok. I really don't care. The point being that I'm going to make is, with everything going on in the country, this guy is sitting there learning how to make milkshakes with whoever the hell that is, the spirit alchemist. Instead of doing his job, instead of helping Canadians or whatever he's supposed to be doing, he's, yeah. This guy, he sucks. He just sucks. My God. Alright. This is, Poilievre speaking with reporters. I'm curious to hear what the reporters are going to ask him. And, he typically gives a half-decent answer, or if the reporters step out of line, he'll typically heckle them. So let's see what happens.
dans des quartiers sécuritaires. C'est ça la promesse du Canada, et c'est ce que nous allons ramener.
Don't worry, this is just the end of the French portion.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. As you know, after 9 years of Justin Trudeau,
His microphone
and
is
the
really quiet.
NDP Liberals, everything is broken. And let's face it, the NDP Liberal coalition is back together. They've doubled housing costs, doubled the debt, doubled food bank use, doubled gun crime. With Jagmeet and Justin, it is double trouble for Canadians. Everything is broken. Life costs more. In fact, food prices have risen 36% faster in Canada than in the United States, a gap that opened up after the application of the carbon tax on the farmers and truckers who bring us our food. Now we have 2 million people lined up at food banks. This week we learned there has been a record increase in child poverty over the last year, all while Trudeau and the NDP made grand promises about childcare. 400,000 kids are forced to eat at food banks. 1 in 4 kids are not getting enough food, according to the government's own data. In fact, scurvy is making a comeback. Housing costs have doubled. Rent has doubled, mortgage payments have doubled, down payments have all doubled. And Trudeau's Housing Accelerator Fund, by his own admission, has not built a single solitary new home. 1,400 homeless encampments are now scattered across Ontario, 35 of them in Halifax alone. Our economy is cratering. It's dropped in per capita terms more than any other G7 country. Our per capita GDP is smaller than it was 10 years ago, even though during the same time the American per capita GDP has grown by 18%. Median incomes in our two countries were equal 10 years ago. Now, they're $22,000 American bigger south of the border, where $500 billion net of our investment has poured to build pipelines, factories, businesses, and pay American paychecks with Canadian investment dollars after 9 years of Trudeau and the NDP Liberal tax increases and inflationary deficits. And the worst is yet to come. Trudeau and the NDP have voted for and legislated the quadrupling of the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre, which will stop our trucks from delivering parts to factories, clothing to stores, food to grocery shelves. It will mean billions more will pour across the border into the United States, millions of jobs will be lost, and a big smile will appear on Donald Trump's face as he picks up the phone from the Oval Office to call Canadian factories, trucking companies, mines, to tell them to go south 100 kilometers where there is no carbon tax and other taxes are dropping. The only thing worse than President Trump's tariffs are Prime Minister Trudeau's taxes. It's clear why Trump wants to create American jobs. It's not clear why Justin Trudeau wants to help him do it. And what do we have today? Well, Jagmeet Singh has broken his word yet again. Remember, Jagmeet Singh said the deal was ripped up? Well, now he's taped it right back together. Despite all the poverty and misery and the record gap between rich and poor the NDP crows so much about, they're now keeping the government in power that did it. You know, he said that he would not support Justin Trudeau anymore, and now he's doing just that until at least his pension kicks in next February.
Oh, they figured out the audio was low. Good job.
Canadians to sign on with Trudeau again. And today what we have is a 2-month temporary tax trick that will not make up for the permanent quadrupling carbon tax on heat, housing, food, and fuel, and all to save Justin's job and Jagmeet's pension. Ironically, in just a few months, Trudeau and the NDP plan to raise taxes on all the same items they claim they're giving you a break on, directly through the carbon tax. They'll be raising taxes on heat, on gas, on everything that comes in a truck. If you got it, a truck brought it, and it will be more expensive with this carbon tax. They even plan to jack up liquor taxes in April while they claim to be taking them off for the next 2 months. That sounds like a trick. A trick. Are you fooled? You don't look like you're fooled. He can see the trick. Like he's even he's laughing. Nobody believes Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh after they've impoverished our people and made life worse off. The good news is there will be a carbon tax election, and Canadians will choose between the costly NDP Liberal carbon tax coalition that tax your food, punish your work, double your housing cost, and unleash crime and chaos in your community, or common sense Conservatives who will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. But we have solutions, and we're offering them today. We're calling for an alternative, which is this: permanently axe the carbon tax. Permanently take the GST off new homes to save people up to $50,000 on a new home purchase and stimulate 30,000 extra home builds every single year. A permanent tax cut that will boost our economy. Cutting taxes on work, savings, investment, energy, and making stuff in Canada. In other words, let's bring home more paychecks and production to our country. More importantly, let's bring home Canada's promise. A very simple promise that brought us all here, and it is this: that hard work gets you a powerful paycheck and pension that buys affordable food, gas, and homes in safe neighborhoods, a country where anyone from anywhere can do anything, the freest country on earth. Let's bring it home.
Greenpeace était chez vous ce matin. Greenpeace était devant chez vous ce matin. Est-ce que vous avez quelque chose pour rassurer les écologistes en précisant
I don't know why they don't have a translator here. Somebody in chat, please.
Nous sommes le seul parti avec un plan.
All right, let's skip over to the English.
Au Canada, il faut exporter notre pays de dictature
I know some words, but I don't know everything.
et le plus grand chèque est protégé.
Vote against this measure if it's. To be clear, you will vote against this, and if this is brought against us, you will vote against this measure if it's brought in the House of Commons.
We haven't seen the measure. We've seen his press releases, and if we believed NDP Liberal press releases, then we might have been tricked, as many in the media were, when they believed the rhetoric on the carbon tax. Remember, they said the carbon tax would make you better off. And here we are with the food professor showing that food prices have risen 37% faster in Canada than in the US, a gap that opened up as the tax started applying here on the farmers and truckers who bring us our food. And of course, then the parliamentary budget officer came out years after all of you wrongly reported and regurgitated Liberal talking points on the carbon tax. He came out and said, no, 100% of middle-class Canadians are worse off under the carbon tax, and 60% of all Canadians are worse off. So you're asking me if I'm going to vote for today's press release and press conference. I don't vote for press releases and press conferences. Canadians cannot eat press or live in press releases or press conferences. Let's see what they put before us. But I've got a better idea. Here's what I propose. When they come forward, put in the bill 2 ideas that will help forever. Axe the carbon tax, axe the GST on new homes.
Qu'est-ce que vous dites, M. Poilievre? Qu'est-ce que vous dites aux députés? Qu'est-ce que vous dites aux députés conservateurs qui n'aiment pas votre contrôle sur le caucus?
Comme qui?
Plusieurs députés conservateurs qui se sont confiés.
Non.
Ils se sont confiés sous le couvert de l'anonymat parce qu'ils ont peur des représailles, M. Poilievre.
Alrighty, I don't know what that was, so continue on, continue
Ça, c'est la
on.
règle de tous les...
C'est pas nous parler.
Oui, il vous parle.
Non, jamais.
Non, on n'en parle pas.
Sur l'annonce
Oh! I really wish I knew what they were saying.
Canadians in the new year. You've said before that when the government prints money, it's inflationary. What do you think about those checks? Do you support the idea of directly returning money to Canadians?
Sorry, that was Justin Trudeau who said that. We put out the quote today,
yes,
where he said
you've said it too.
He
in the
said his
context of
spending. He
inflationary
said
spending.
He said his deficit spending contributes to inflation. Trudeau said every dollar he spends brings an extra dollar of inflation, and that's just a mathematical reality, right? If you have a fixed number of goods and services, and you increase the number of dollars as Justin Trudeau's deficits have done, then all you do is bid up the cost of all the goods people buy, and that's why 25% of kids are in poverty. why record 2 million people are lined up at food banks. Scurvy's making a comeback. Housing costs have doubled. That's the misery that you get with massive socialist money printing. And what I'm proposing is a common sense alternative. Let's cap spending, cut waste, bring down deficits, interest rates, and inflation. And by the way, let's axe the carbon tax and axe the GST on new homes.
This guy's just straight up touching him, trying to get his attention. Oh my god, man. They're like fucking locusts, just swarming him.
What exactly do you mean by that when you say you're going to fight fire with fire? Are you talking about tit-for-tat tariffs, or are you talking about something else?
Well, right now we have two leaders that want to charge Canadians more. You know, President Trump has proposed tariffs on Canadians. Justin Trudeau is proposing taxes on Canadians. It's clear why President Trump wants to create jobs for Americans. It's not clear why Justin Trudeau is so determined to help him do it. Trudeau's capital gains tax hike is going to kill 60,000 Canadian jobs. Blocking energy and resource projects is going to send more production south of the border, as it already has. In the first 14 years of this decade, of this century, we had more American investment in Canada. In the last 9 years, $500 billion Canadian dollars have left for the U.S. more than have come back. That's Canadian investment dollars creating American jobs. My approach will be this. We will cut taxes on work, investment, energy, and making stuff in Canada. We will greenlight massive resource projects to bring home production, and we will fight for an end to the softwood lumber tariffs and the discriminatory Buy America rules that Justin Trudeau capitulated on and let the Americans, our American friends, keep in place. We're going to have a prime minister who will stand up for our people again, and won't that be refreshing?
And just like that, he disappears to never be seen again. Anthony, you were curious about how Chrystia Freeland was doing, so I found something from her earlier today. Our two favorite people in the world, everyone. Would you take a look at this? Oh, look at all the food behind them. Wow.
I guess I get to go first then.
Wow.
Sorry. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Vince's Market in Sharon, Ontario. We're an independent grocer, and I'm a second-generation grocer. My name is Giancarlo Tremarchi. So myself and my father would like to welcome, obviously, our Prime Minister, our Deputy Prime Minister, and the fellow members of Parliament to our grocery store. As an independent grocer, we're always looking for opportunities to provide value to our customers, and of course, the challenge with affordability has been one of those things that has been tough to handle and tough to convey to our customers. So we welcome the PM today for their announcements, and I'd like to welcome our MP, Tony Van Bynen.
Thank you very much, Giancarlo. You know, Giancarlo, I was just sharing with him, the first time we met, Giancarlo was in the backyard of a home in Mount Albert, and he was helping to build a child's play structure that they had raised money for. So to me, that was an indication of someone who really cared about the community. Giancarlo, your hands-on approach to community support and sustainable business practices and food rescue initiatives demonstrate your dedication to making a positive impact beyond the business realm. Vince's Community Product Program has raised $170,000 for vital organizations, and you've set aside a significant amount of your yearly budget for other grassroots initiatives. So it talks to me about your commitment to community and something you should be proud of. You also led the Canadian Federation Independent Grocers to establish the Canadian Grocery Code of Conduct, and that's had an influence in the industry beyond your local community. And you've been recognized by your Chamber of Commerce as a Business Person of the Year. So it's a real pleasure to be here, to be in the company of people who care about their community. But it is my pleasure to introduce the Prime Minister, and it really is a pleasure to do so. He's a thoughtful, genuine, and sincere person who cares about people. And during my term of office, I have seen firsthand the works that he does work tirelessly for Canadians. Examples are protecting NAFTA when it was under attack, supporting families and workers and businesses.
He's a thoughtful person, all right.
Pandemic. and leading our country through an economic recovery that is better than just about anywhere else. All this with a steadfast focus on building a solid foundation for a future and a promise that we will have as the world changes around us. Ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau. Thank you, Tony.
Good morning, everyone. Great to be here today with all of you. Very excited to be here with the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, Chrystia, to talk about something we're doing on affordability. Giancarlo, thank you so much for welcoming us here to Vince's. As a strong independent grocer, you've had a real impact on people's lives. You've also seen over the past years the challenges folks have faced, and we're glad to make a big announcement today. Tony and Francesco, it's great to be back in the region. Great to be here with all of you to talk about how we're going to make life more affordable for so many people. L'annonce qu'on fait aujourd'hui va faire beaucoup d'heureux. La trajectoire de notre économie est dans la bonne direction. On est en train de voir l'inflation diminuer. On est en train de
All right,
voir
I'm going to skip over the French because I don't think anybody here really wants to listen to that or fully understands it.
Pour les parents, contraception sera donnée, whether it's dental, qu'on peut en faire encore plus. The programs that we're delivering, whether it's dental care, whether it's pharmacare with free insulin or free prescription contraceptives, whether it's more spaces and $10 a day child care that is saving families thousands of dollars, whether it's dental care that's taken huge pressures off of primarily seniors' budgets, but also others. These are things that are making a difference. But at the same time, Canadians are still struggling to get by. These elements have taken off pressures, but there is more to do.
It's so perfect when it lines up directly when he's trying to make a serious statement.
Especially parents are particularly worried. Canadians have been through a lot. They work hard.
Freeland looks more composed than normal.
Get through the past couple of years. Everyone had to tighten their belts a little bit. And now we're going to be able to give a tax break for all Canadians. For 2 months, starting December 14th, we're going to remove the GST, HST from groceries, 100% of groceries, all groceries. We're going to remove the GST from restaurant meals, takeouts, fast food. Removing the GST from beer and wine. Removing the GST for essentials like kids' clothing, footwear, diapers, and toys, all tax-free, removing the GST and HST. For 2 months, Canadians are going to get a real break on everything they do.
Just for 2 months, though.
We also know that there's more we need to do, particularly for working Canadians.
Where is that extra money going to come from then, Justin?
And earned up to $150,000. We're going to be sending you a check for $250 in just a few months. Our government can't set prices at checkout, but we can put more money in people's pockets. The Working Canadians rebate of $250, which will be sent to people in April, is going to give people that relief they need. And the tax break over the next 2 months is going to help on the costs of everything as we approach the holidays, as we get into the new year. These are things that recognize that people are squeezed, and we're there to help. Money that will help people buy the things they need and save up for the things they want. And the final comment is that I really hope that all parties in the House get behind this so we can pass this quickly, so that Canadians can get this relief as soon as December 14th. Merci beaucoup tout le monde d'être ici. Looking forward to taking your questions in a moment, but for now, I'm going to pass it over to...
Oh, he is actually going to take questions. I was about to call him out on that, to be honest.
Canadians, Chrystia Freeland, our finance minister.
Oh no, do we really want to listen to Freeland?
The Prime Minister is a little bit taller than I am. Okay, well, I want to start by saying, buongiorno Giancarlo, grazie mille per l'accoglio. It is really wonderful to be here at Vince's, which is a local institution. a place
Wow.
that is trusted and I'm going to say beloved by families in this community. Ça me fait plaisir d'être ici pour faire Canada, qui Prime Minister Tony Francesco and I had a chance to talk to Giancarlo. Tony and Francesco know him well and know Vince's very well. And it was such a valuable window into the life of this community and also into the lives of Canadians. And what Giancarlo told us, you know, you can see what has been happening in the Canadian economy at the checkout counter here at Vince's. He talked about how
And
things
who's
were
responsible
really
for
hard
that?
for Canadians at the beginning of this year. That, you know, inflation was coming down, but interest rates were still high. And that was really biting in the pocketbook. And he saw it with what people were able to afford to buy here. One thing that Giancarlo told us that I really loved is he said he could almost measure the trajectory of interest rates by what people were doing at the cash register here. And as rates have come down, people have been coming back into Vince's and have been able to spend a little bit more. So that story from Giancarlo makes him my favorite person of the day. Grazie mille. That's exactly what we know Canadians need. Canadians needed that relief. And the good news is, now that inflation is under control, it has been within the Bank of Canada's target range for 10 months in a row. That has allowed the bank to bring down rates, and that has created the space for us to...
So I just need to point out that if they did cut GST and taxes on everything for 2 months, after that 2-month period is up, they would need to recover that lost revenue somehow. So no, it's really... I don't know, man. In the long run, it's probably just going to screw everybody even harder. It's not going to make Canadians' lives easier.
Provide a little more relief for hard-working Canadians. And so today we're announcing 2 really important forms of support. The first you're going to see at the cash register here at Vince's and at grocery stores, at restaurants, at toy stores across the country. This is going to be about giving just a little bit of extra help to families over the holidays from the middle of December to the middle of February. We are going to have a GST holiday on all prepared foods. So right now, some foods are not subject to GST, but prepared foods are. Things like a rotisserie chicken. Things like, you know, if you have had a really busy day and you have to feed your kids at the end of the day, maybe you're tempted to go to the grocery store and pick up a prepared meal, but it's expensive. And on top of the extra cost of a prepared meal, you have to pay the GST. And Giancarlo has been telling us, you know, he sees young working families wanting to buy those prepared meals, but sometimes they can't quite afford it. Lifting the GST is going to make it that little bit easier. And it comes just in time for the holidays, when people are going to want to be entertaining, are going to want to have people over. So prepared foods, lifting the GST. Restaurant meals, lifting the GST. That's going to include beer and wine, no GST. And Giancarlo does sell beer and wine here. So you're going to be able to do that at your grocery stores, your gas stations, where beer and wine are available. And
get absolutely hammered, but don't worry about food. Just drink yourself to death.
Holidays. So we're also lifting the GST on a carefully chosen basket of holiday gifts. Kids' clothes, diapers, car seats, kids' shoes. It includes things like like toques, like mitts for your kids, scarves. Also on toys for your kids. Also on books and periodicals. So this is really about saying to Canadians, things have been hard. They are getting better. Our economy really looks like it is having a soft landing from the COVID recession. And this is about making life a little bit easier because we have the space now to do it. Le deuxième annonce, c'est
Wow, I cannot believe the words she has just said. She is so out of touch, man.
pour les travailleurs qui gagnent are about, this is about, these checks for $250 are about recognizing that working Canadians have been through some tough times. And this is about providing direct support to the people who have been working hard to get us through some tough times, and the people who we are counting on to power Canada's economic recovery. I do want to offer one piece of practical advice. We want to know if you were working in 2023. So please, if you haven't filed a tax return, file your tax return by December 31st. That will make it possible for us to send you that check for $250. It's going to be paid on an individual basis to everyone who worked in 2023 and made $150,000 or less. So support for working people, the people who have really gotten our country through a tough time and who we're counting on to really power a very strong recovery at the end of this year and next year. Merci beaucoup pour votre temps et nous sommes prêts à répondre à vos questions.
Oh, thank you for all your struggles for the past almost 10 years. Here's $250.
We'll now begin the question period. One question, one follow-up.
Hey,
Our first question will go to iPolitics.
Hey, good morning, Prime Minister. Barbara with iPolitics. How are you?
Very well, thank you, Barbara.
Good. I'm just going to pass along some questions from my editor, Marco Vigliotti. So do you think any...
Now, if you get your $250, hold on to it. Please hold on to it. I might just identify as Indigenous or something like Randy did and just get one of those contracts or something for a couple $1 million or however that worked.
Any of this would be happening today if the Liberals weren't so reliant on the NDP for support in the House?
I'm glad the NDP has indicated it's going to be behind us on moving forward on a GST rebate, a GST break for the next 2 months. This is another thing we're stepping up to do on top of all the measures we put forward for affordability over the past years. Things like dental care, things like dropping child care costs to $10 a day and expanding accessibility for it. We're moving forward on pharmacare, which is free insulin for those who need it and free prescription contraceptives for people who need it. We're moving forward on a school food program. It's going to take hundreds of dollars off Canadians' grocery bills. These are things that we've been focused on throughout. Now, in the House right now, the Conservatives continue to vote against all of our affordability measures and are even blocking the work we're doing to pass a number of these measures to deliver for Canadians. We're glad to see the NDP looks like it's going to get behind us and allow Parliament to deliver these things for Canadians, but we're all going to work together at it.
Thank you. So you said earlier this year in an interview that giving checks to Canadians would increase inflation. So why are you willing to do this right now, especially considering that rising inflation is what has prompted the Bank of Canada to drive up interest rates? And if you can also say that in French, please.
Sorry, that was a couple of years ago where global inflation had the Bank of Canada needing to respond by raising interest rates. And we stepped forward in direct measures like reducing child care costs, like delivering dental care, moving forward in ways that were supporting families without impacting directly on inflation. Inflation is down. We're back down. We've been close to a year within the target range that the Bank of Canada set, which is why the Bank of Canada is now dropping interest rates faster than for most of our peer countries. And it allows us to make sure that we are putting money in people's pockets in a way that is not going to stimulate inflation, but is going to help them make ends meet and continue our economic growth. This is something that we're doing because, and we're able to do because Canada has one of the strongest balance sheets in the world, the lowest deficit in the G7, the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7 and decreasing. We have a strong fiscal position. We're putting it to work for supporting Canadians with a tax break for all Canadians and with checks, rebates for working Canadians. Yeah, you can add something. I'll answer in French. Wait. Nous avons des investissements visés où on peut comme un congé de la mine des arbres de nos Canadiens liés leur vie les Canadiens.
A couple
She literally has to get up on a step stool every time. Oh my God, man.
of elaborations on what the Prime Minister just said. So I really welcome the question because it was a very intentional policy of our government to focus first and foremost on inflation and interest rates. We recognized exactly what Giancarlo saw at the cash register here. We recognized that the single biggest pain point for Canadians was the high interest rates that the Bank of Canada imposed because inflation was high. The Canadian economy is uniquely sensitive to high interest rates because Canadian people are sensitive to high interest rates. We tend to have 5-year mortgages, and so when interest rates went up, it really hurt Canadian families. And like, don't ask me, ask Giancarlo, because they were buying less stuff here. They couldn't afford it. We knew we had to do everything we could to support inflation coming down and interest rates coming down. And the good news for Canadians is that is happening. As the Prime Minister said, for 10 months in a row, inflation has been in the Bank of Canada's target range, and the bank has now lowered rates 4 times. That is really good news for Canadians. The other reality is, right now, the challenge in the Canadian economy is as much on the consumer demand side. You know, where we are seeing some fragility in the economy is what Giancarlo sees here in his store, that Canadian consumers are squeezed and they are not able to go out and spend. That's a problem for Canadian families. It's
Oh, you don't say, Freeland.
Canadian economy. And so this
Whoa.
measure is an affordability measure. It's about making life better and easier for Canadian.
You just put a spell on the camera. I can't believe the things that are coming out of her mouth right now. She is just saying some of the most ridiculous garbage I have ever heard, man. She acts like she has not been involved in the government at all. The pricing of everything going up. Oh my God, man. Insane how she sits there. Canadians are struggling right now. The prices of everything are going up. Canadians, we're going to give you $250 in a few months. They act like they're helping us. I don't know. They're just so out of touch, man. It's very frustrating to listen to them speak. And they act like they're these saints, these heroic individuals that are bringing Canada back because, you know, they didn't cause the record high inflation or anything like that. And then when they bring it down a percentage, they sit there and go, we did it, guys. We're helping Canadians. Oh my God, man.
Families, it's also going to be good for our economy by helping Canadians, by helping Canadian families go out and buy those groceries they need, buy the things their families need for their holidays, buy their kids a new coat or a new toque and put it under the Christmas tree. And there's going to be no GST on Christmas trees as well. Or Lego set.
For Christmas,
I'm such a boring mom, right? It's true. Yes, okay, a Lego set as well as your cute toque. Also, plush toys and dolls are included, so are video games. And that is going to be good for Canadian families. It's going to provide them the relief they need, and it's also good for the economy at this time because we as a government and as a country have done the hard work we needed to do to get inflation down and put interest rates on a downward path.
Yes, you're only driving off the cliff at 1 kilometer an hour. That's it's okay, guys. We're not going as fast.
Next question.
Bonjour, Luna Charpentier de Radio-Canada. Une question en français pour vous. Le congé de taxes pour les Canadiens, les chèques, c'est des mesures qui vont coûter très cher. Est-ce que le gouvernement peut se permettre de telles mesures?
On a une des meilleures, ou sinon la meilleure IB chaîne positive pour 205 au service
purement politique.
avec depuis les peut me donner un congé direct.
And his former news. Now that the ICC has issued warrants for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, Canadian law enforcement is obligated to arrest them should they come to Canada. Will you allow that to happen, or will you step in to prevent an arrest?
First of all, as Canada has always said, it's really important that everyone abide by international law. This is something we've been calling on from the beginning of the conflict.
I need to get a witch's hat for Freeland.
Of the International Criminal Court and International Court of Justice. We stand up for international law, and we will abide by all the regulations and rulings of the international courts. This is just who we are as Canadians. At the same time, we need to keep working to solve this terrible situation. We need to see aid flowing in to people who are facing famine and disease. We need to see all the hostages released. We need to see Hamas lay down its arms. We condemn Hamas for its continued actions. We need to see a ceasefire that protects civilians. We need to get back on track towards a two-state solution.
All right, broken record Trudeau, just saying literally the same thing over and over again, but doing nothing to accomplish these things that he claims that he says he's for. All right, let's get into House of Commons proceedings.
Because we have a government that's not interested in accountability and transparency. And people of this parliament, the parliament has asked for the documents. The documents must be produced.
In comments, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, Government House Leader.
Oh boy, the
Mr. Speaker, I'm wondering
SDTC.
if the member has any concerns in terms of the amount of control that the leader of the Conservative Party has over his members. When we start hearing that there's MPs, Conservative MPs that are being tracked and followed, and pictures and so forth being taken and reported back to the leader, that you have to say the slogans that the Conservatives want you to say, otherwise you will be punished, if not directly, indirectly. And then we have a leader who continues to feel that he doesn't have to get the security clearance, even though it's in the best interest of Canadians for him to do so. He continues to thumb.
Yeah, I did briefly talk about the ICBM earlier in the stream. There was a lot of information coming out that contradicts itself, and as of right now, I do not know what to believe. CNN said that the Kremlin wasn't going to talk about this issue and come out and talk about it, but then Putin came out and apparently said that it was a intermediate range missile that was used. Then you have other sources saying that it was the first ever ICBM used in this war, or in like history ever, and they just keep coming out with different stories right now, and I'm kind of waiting for a solid answer, but I did cover it earlier, yes. There was also a press conference where this woman got a call from a higher up Russian official telling her not to talk about the issue live during the press conference. Now, whether that was real or not, I don't know. There's a lot of crazy stuff coming out about that situation right now. And I'm kind of waiting, like I said, for something solid to come out.
Which has been laid at the feet of the Liberal government is far bigger than the sponsorship scandal that cratered the Chrétien government. So, Mr. Speaker, this is important because it's about accountability. As my colleague from Toronto St. Paul said, it's about accountability. It's about transparency. It's about the responsible use of Canadians' hard-earned dollars, all of which have been wasted by this government and insiders, Liberal insiders, who are involved in graft and corruption. Now, Mr. Speaker, before I delve more deeply into this green slush fund scandal, I did want to just chat very briefly and direct some comments to the residents of Abbotsford. This is a community that has supported me for 19 years. And by the time I leave this chamber, it'll be probably closer to 20 years. They've been very loyal to me. I've been able to win 6 elections.
Yeah, that's pretty much how most of the Conservatives are at like the very, very back of the opposition side. They're all just like this.
I've had the opportunity during that period of time to
Not a lot of
help
energy.
shape Canada's trade policy.
Just reading the
Trade
script.
agreements like the European Free Trade Agreement with Canada, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, our trade agreement with South Korea. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, that also included negotiating Canada's free trade agreement with Ukraine. It's not a Liberal accomplishment. The original free trade agreement with Ukraine was negotiated under Stephen Harper. I also was able over those years, Mr. Speaker, to deliver on a number of infrastructure priorities for my community. For example, the McCallum Road overpass and the Clearbrook Road overpass, the Mill Lake Spray Park. I was able to deliver on some social priorities like the anti-youth and gang crime funding that keeps youth out of getting involved in gangs and violent crime. But the biggest ask I've made of this government, Mr. Speaker, and I ask you to take note of this, the biggest ask was that this government step up to the plate and help Abbotsford avoid future natural disasters. Now, you may recall, Mr. Speaker, back in 2021, Abbotsford suffered through the worst natural disaster in British Columbia's history. The damage was in the billions of dollars. International trade was brought to a halt because goods couldn't come to and from the Vancouver port because railways couldn't get their products to the port. Highway number 1 was completely severed, all because of a massive flood in the Abbotsford area on Sumas Prairie. Thousands of livestock were killed. They died, they drowned. So, Mr. Speaker, with billions of dollars of economic activity at stake, with lives at stake, one would think that this government would have stepped up and helped Abbotsford. In fact, what happened, Mr. Speaker, is this. When the flood happened, the Prime Minister, as he is wont to do, he shows up in Abbotsford. It's time for a photo op. He meets with all the business leaders and the political leaders in Abbotsford, and he says, I've got your back. In fact, let me quote to you, Mr. Speaker, exactly what he said. Quote, we'll be there for the cleanup and the rebuilding after the impacts of these extreme weather events, he said. It's really going to be important that Canadians continue to do what we, the government, do, which is being there for each other in this difficult situation, and we will continue to be, end quote. That's what our Prime Minister said to the residents of Abbotsford and some of the other flood-affected communities in British Columbia. He made a promise. We're going to deliver the help that you need to mitigate against future events like these. So more recently, Mr. Speaker, City of Abbotsford, City of Merritt, Princeton, all put in applications for the government to step up to the plate and do what it had promised to do. Do what the Prime Minister had promised that he was going to do. Namely, deliver the kind of funding required to be able to build diking and pumping infrastructure that would prevent these kinds of events from happening again. And what did this government do? They said no. And for anyone watching in Canada, especially the residents of Abbotsford, you must understand the City of Abbotsford made an application to the federal government for the funding to be able to replace and enhance the Barrowtown pump station, to provide for additional diking, strengthening existing dikes, so that this massive flood event would not happen again. And this Prime Minister said no. Now, in case any of my Liberal colleagues over there suggest that, well, you know, that promise was never made. More recently, one of the members of that government approached me and in a moment of candidness said to me, You know, Ed, we really failed Abbotsford. I am so sorry. We promised to deliver support, and we didn't. That is at the feet of this Liberal government. It's only one of a host of scandals that have surrounded this Prime Minister and his corrupt and unethical government. Now, Mr. Speaker, that's only the tip of the iceberg, because today we're talking about the Green Slush Fund scandal. And I did want to explain a little bit about what that entails, that scandal. There's this organization called Sustainable Development Technology Canada, which was created to support small and medium-sized businesses that had innovations in the green technology space. Innovations that would help Canadians become more technologically advanced and environmentally sustainable. And you know what? There's merit in that. We all want to do our part for the environment. So what this Prime Minister does, he asks this organization, SDTC, to create a new fund. Let's call it $1 billion fund, to help these young entrepreneurs, small and medium-sized businesses, perhaps expand markets, maybe do further research, develop their products, market their products in a way that Canada could find a way of leveraging our strengths, our educational expertise to deliver value for Canadians, and at the same time respond to the emergent environmental challenges that our world faces. But instead of doing what's right, which is to evaluate each application under the Green Slush Fund on its merits, something quite different happened. The Prime Minister appointed a board to administer these applications, to evaluate and assess these applications, and these very directors of the board, who have a fiduciary duty not only to SDTC, but to the taxpayers of Canada, what did they do? Instead of evaluating these projects on their merits and declaring conflicts of interest where they arose, they enriched themselves by awarding these monies to themselves, to their own companies. So imagine, Mr. Speaker, you're a director on this board.
Hundreds of millions of dollars given to their own companies.
It's supposed to administer taxpayer money. They're basically holding this money in trust for taxpayers to make sure that Canadians get value for that money. And instead of doing their job and discharging their fiduciary duty, they say, hey, I've got a company. I'd love to skim millions of dollars off the top here and give it to my own company. Then, of course, I benefit from it because that increases profits in my company. I get dividends. I become rich as a result. That's exactly what those directors did. They stole money from taxpayers and funneled it to their own companies. Now, by any account, by any standard, that is a scandal. It is corruption and graft of the highest order. And as I said, Mr. Speaker, when I spoke earlier to this particular scandal, I fully expect that people are going to go to jail as a result of this scandal. Will there be members of this House of Commons that go to jail as a result? Members of the Cabinet? We don't know. Will there be Liberal insiders that go to jail as a result of this? We don't know.
And point of order, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Best of my knowledge, there's only been one MP that's gone to jail. That's the Conservative.
That's following a debate.
Oh!
Just to remind the honourable member that time will expire at 2 o'clock. So
good old deranged Kevin.
Another point of order, the honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
I just want to point out the member for Abbotsford, who I don't often agree with, has lots of experience. So if he's concerned someone might go to jail, I think we should let him continue to speak.
I don't think that was a point of order either, but thank the honourable for the input.
All right, Beetlejuice.
The honourable
Whatever
member
you
for
say.
Abbotsford.
Well, Mr. Speaker, you know, it's interesting to hear these interruptions because obviously my words have touched a nerve on that side, and it's very clear that the NDP Liberal coalition is really worried about where this scandal is taking them in this government. And so what was the Prime Minister's response here? Well, there was a request that came from this House of Commons that the government deliver to the House of Commons, to parliamentarians, all the documents having to do with this green slush fund scandal, a Liberal scandal. And the Speaker specifically directed the government to deliver those documents. And of course, what the Prime Minister didn't want to do is deliver any of those documents, so he did what his government has done so regularly. He engaged in something called redaction. It's just a fancy word for censoring documents. They would take all these documents and they would black them out. Pages and pages and pages of just black. So there's nothing, no information of value to glean from those documents, and then he delivered those documents. And the Speaker had expressly instructed those documents to be delivered in unredacted form. So you know what the Prime Minister did, Mr. Speaker? He thumbed his nose at the Speaker, at the Speaker's chair. Now, Mr. Speaker, you understand that you are the highest authority in Parliament. There is no appeal from your decision. So when you order the government to deliver documents, there is no appeal from that decision.
Yeah, it was a lawful order too.
With. And the Prime Minister thumbed his nose at parliamentarians, at the law. He thumbed his nose at Canadians. And that's why today we're in this House, why the business of this House has ground to a halt. It has nothing to do with obstruction. It has to do with our intent to get to the bottom of this rottenness that has infected this Liberal government. This Prime Minister has presided over the most corrupt government in Canadian history. In fact, one of my colleagues on the Conservative side recently cited statistics that show that 1/3 of all major scandals in Canada's complete history, from 1867 till now, 1/3 of those scandals have taken place under this Liberal government.
Wow.
Unbelievable that that should happen in today's day and age.
That's a lot of scandal.
And you know, yes, that is a lot of scandal. Thank you. And it's way too much scandal because it involves, at the end of the day, billions of dollars of taxpayers' money that has been recklessly spent, that has been defrauded from taxpayers. Mr. Speaker, we as a country, we can do so much better. We as a parliament can do so much better. When the Prime Minister was elected, you may recall that he issued mandate letters to each of his ministers where he demanded that they be transparent and accountable to Parliament itself. And now this very Prime Minister is violating the very mandates that he had purported to impose on his ministers. So it shouldn't surprise you, Mr. Speaker, that minister after minister after minister becomes embroiled in their own scandals, like the other Randy scandal that we've been dealing with in this House, where a minister of the Crown gets involved in a shady company, pretends that he's Indigenous when he isn't. Then he gets government contracts by pretending his company is Indigenous when it isn't. You know, it's been said, Mr. Speaker, that a fish rots from the head down. And that is an apt description of this government. When the head of your government, the Prime Minister himself, is not willing to comply with ethical standards imposed by the law and is convicted on 2 occasions of conflicts of interest, you can expect that all those on his team are going to follow suit. And here we are today We've got this scandal, one of many, of dozens of scandals. We as a country can do better, and surely we as a parliament can do better. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It is time for statements by members. Déclaration de député.
Alrighty, statements by members.
Halifax West.
See what they got to say.
I am honored to represent Halifax West, a diverse and growing riding, and I am proud to deliver investments to support.
We are about 10 minutes out from question period, so don't go anywhere. If you're joining us right now, make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button. Thank you for joining. I appreciate it very much.
Infrastructure projects. With that money, my constituents are benefiting from better audio and lighting at Bella Rose Arts Centre, improved basketball court in Fairview, newly renovated accessible Fairview Resource Centre, building upgrades at the Fairview Legion, accessible doors at the Lakeside Legion, improvements to the BLT trail, and extensive renovations at Salvation Army, AV equipment at the Cedar Event Center, an elevator and accessible washroom at St. Mary's Cathedral, Basilica Foundation, and the Upper Hammonds Plains with the Rec and Art Center. Speaker, I'm committed to continue delivering investments in my constituency. Thank you.
The honourable member for Edmonton West.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to honour Maureen Purvis, the heart and soul of No Stone Left Alone. No Stone Left Alone was officially launched in 2011 to help ensure an enduring national respect and gratitude for the sacrifice of Canadian men and women who lost their lives in the service of peace. Maureen's mother, Lillian, was also a veteran herself. When honoring her mom's headstone with a poppy, Maureen's daughter would ask why other headstones do not have a poppy. Thus was born Maureen's mission to see that one day all soldiers' headstones would have a poppy placed in their honor. This year, 11,000 students from across the country honored more than 80,000 veterans with a poppy. Maureen and her husband Randy's dedication reminds us of the power of remembrance and the importance of staying connected to our history. I'm proud to work with my predecessor, the Honorable Lori Hahn, and to support Maureen in her selfless work. Maureen, thank you for your commitment in preserving our past, ensuring those who've served Canada, and ensuring that no stone is left alone.
Just a reminder to honourable members just to try to keep the noise down so that these great SO31s can be presented to the floor. The honourable member for Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In recent years, Pakistan's democracy has faced some serious challenges, including limited space for dissent, media suppression, judicial manipulation, and others. And as Milton is home to the largest Pakistani community in Canada, this issue affects many of my neighbours, friends, and constituents back home. Human Rights Watch has noted that the military's strong influence over politics undermines civilian authority and democratic principles. Laws are being used to silence opposition and activists and marginalized groups like women and religious minorities, and many of those are being systematically excluded. The government's crackdown on opposition parties has led to hundreds of detentions. Under pressure or duress, some political leaders have left their parties entirely. Journalists report being intimidated, harassed, and monitored for criticizing the government. Many politicians and journalists have been charged under Pakistan's vague sedition laws, and dozens have been tried in military courts, which is a violation of international law. True democracy in Pakistan and around the world requires more than just elections. It must protect basic human rights, promote inclusivity, respect journalistic independence, freedom of expression, and ensure that independent institutions are free from political control. Restoring democracy depends on fostering tolerance and accountability throughout the government. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député d'Abitibi.
The Honourable Member.
Greg is here.
Témiscamingue. I would like to mark the passing of Mr. Philippe Barrette, a great contributor to my region. Mr. Barrette devoted over 30 years of his life to politics, notably as president of the Témiscamingue School Board, as mayor of the town of Témiscamingue for 20 years, and as prefect of his regional county municipality. He had a strong regionalist spirit. I'd also like to say that he worked closely with my father on Abitibi-Témiscamingue's Regional Development Council. Mr. Barrette was involved in the forestry sector for a long time. He was behind the creation of the Témiscamingue Watershed Organization and was instrumental in the creation of Parc Haut-Pémican, one of Quebec's newest jewels. I find it particularly touching that Mr. Barrette was honored during his lifetime, especially when he received the Regional Prefect's Medal in 2023. I offer my deepest condolences to Thérèse, with whom he was married for 65 years. I offer my condolences to his children, Lise, Jean, Marc, to his grandchildren, and to his many friends and family. Thank you, Philippe. I'll be thinking of you when I pass that park that bears your name in the heart of your magnificent city that we love so much.
Le député de Vaudreuil.
The Honourable Member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the 30th anniversary of La Source d'Entraide, a beacon of compassion and support in Saint-Lazare.
1993, when a small group of volunteers organized the town's first guignolet, or holiday food drive, it has since grown into a thrift store, food bank, and resource center, and serves a vital resource for those in need. At the heart of La Source d'Entraide's impact is an exceptional team, led by Andréane Lavigne and fueled by a remarkable team of over 150 volunteers. La Source d'Entraide embodies the very best of our community's values, and their contributions have touched countless lives over 3 decades. Parmi ces bénévoles extraordinaires,
one of these extraordinary volunteers is Monique Gravel. She has volunteered there 3 days a week, every week for the past 30 years. On behalf of our community of Vaudreuil-Soulanges and on behalf of all members of Parliament, I extend my warmest thanks to La Source d'Entraide and its inspiring team. I wish them continued success in their inspiring work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Centre.
Mr. Speaker, more proof that this NDP Liberal government is not worth the cost nor the corruption. The Department of Immigration is in disarray. Canada's once respected immigration system is another casualty of this government's failures. The Liberals have issued a passport to a convicted human smuggler responsible for the deaths of 8 migrants, despite a court order forbidding it, and the previous confiscation of multiple fake Canadian passports. Just incompetence, the minister will say, but here's the reality of his complicity in Canada's broken immigration system. A foreign student, Zane Hack, violated the terms of his study permit, was arrested 10 times, convicted of mischief, and led a foreign-funded rebellion. Facing deportation after costing our legal system thousands of dollars, the minister intervened to keep him here. The government stands up for their friends, even when those friends are convicted criminals. Canadians have seen enough. It's time for an election to restore trust, integrity, and effective leadership in Canada.
L'honorable député d'Outremont.
The Honourable Member for Outremont. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quebec has just lost a great artist. He was a legendary poet, a counterculture icon, a radio host, a French teacher, and, of course, a member of the rock band Autre Chose. Lucien Francoeur left his mark on Quebec. He was a proud Outremonter for nearly 4 decades. He spent almost 40 years living in Outremont, Mr. Speaker. It was a real honor to bump into him just a few weeks ago with Caroline and Marie, his neighbor, at a terrace on Rue Bernard, a street that he loved very much. He used to go around on the streets in a leather vest, and I'll remember that forever. He was known for his unwavering rock and roll spirit, his charisma, and his authenticity. We will miss this freak from Montreal very much. His wife Claudine, his sister Carole, his brothers Donald and Louis, and his daughter Virginie, who is herself a poet and professor at the University of Montreal. They will all mourn him. An entire generation of Quebecers will also mourn him. Farewell, Lulu.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown.
Mr. Speaker, although progress has been made to reduce impaired driving, it remains a scourge on Canadian society. Every year, hundreds of people are killed and thousands are injured in crashes involving alcohol, cannabis, and other drugs. These tragedies are entirely preventable. That's why Mothers Against Drunk Driving Canada's annual Project Red Ribbon campaign raises awareness about impaired driving, especially during the holiday season, a time when the risk is higher. This year, the campaign honors Jacob Simmons, a young man whose life was tragically cut short in my home province of Prince Edward Island by an impaired driver. Unfortunately, Prince Edward Island also has the highest rate of impaired driving in Canada, despite consistently imposing the most severe sentences in this country. Mr. Speaker, I encourage all Islanders and Canadians to support this campaign by making responsible choices and wearing a red ribbon to honor victims and survivors of impaired driving. Together, we can create a safer future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Mégantic.
The honourable member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Mr. Speaker, only this Liberal Prime Minister, supported by the Bloc Québécois, could manage to further break what they have already broken by pretending to fix what they have broken. I'm talking about Canada's immigration system. It was one of the best in the world, but the Prime Minister screwed it up and then sacrificed it to satisfy his massive ego, which is the size of our planet. Remember the Prime Minister's tweet in 2017 telling the world that Canada's doors were open to all? Well, people heard him loud and clear. He increased the number of permits for temporary foreign workers by 154%. He's the head of a federal government that has issued 211% more permits for foreign students. He presented a population growth plan that increased population growth by 300%. He paved the way for Roxham Road, bringing Quebec to a breaking point at a time when a housing crisis, a cost of living crisis, and an access to healthcare crisis are hurting all Quebecers. In a video, the Prime Minister blamed bad actors for his bad decisions. He has only himself to blame for the disappointed families, the worried businesses, and the chaos at the Immigration Department. The only bad actor is this Prime Minister, who is supported by the Bloc Québécois.
Member from Niagara Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has made it clear. His vision for Canada mirrors the Mike Harris common sense revolution, a revolution that was anything but common sense. For Ontario families, Ontario remembers that under Harris, we saw crucial programs that built stronger, healthier communities slashed without thought, infrastructure neglected, and cost recklessly downloaded to municipalities. The result? Soaring property taxes, skyrocketing water bills, and communities left to clean up the mess. Now, the Leader of the Opposition wants to take the same failed approach nationwide, cutting programs like the Housing Accelerator Fund that Canadians rely on, weakening public services, and forcing municipalities and families to bear the financial burden, resulting in property tax and water bill increases. Mr. Speakers, Canadians deserve better. They deserve a government that invests in communities, strengthens public services, and supports affordability, not one that revives the reckless Conservative policies of the past that will increase property taxes and water bills. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'd like to encourage all members, please, during statements by members. These are important statements, to keep your voices down so that the chair and all members can hear the statement. And I'm certain we all want to hear what the honourable member from King Vaughan is going to say.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday in the Status of Women Committee, we heard testimony from Esther, a brave young woman from Nova Scotia. She came to Parliament to share her heart-wrenching story of the murder of her aunt by a repeat offender out on conditional release. She pleaded with committee and government to repeal Bills C-5 and C-75, which have become known as the catch and release and hug and thug policies of this Liberal NDP government. Although the Leader of the NDP claims to have ripped up his contract with the Liberals, he supports these soft on crime policies that have led to a 75% increase in violence, crimes against women. Every day the Prime Minister remains in power, it is because of the Leader of the NDP who voted to support the carbon tax 24 times rather than to support women.
The honourable member from Regina Leuven.
Saskatchewan is the breadbasket of Canada. We have the food, fertilizer, and fuel the world needs. But after 9 years of the carbon tax loving coalition, something has changed. Parents are skipping meals, and mothers are adding water to their children's milk. In fact, between 2019 and 2024, food bank usage in my province increased by 42.1%. The primary causes? The growing cost of housing and food inflation. By 2030, the NDP Liberals will quadruple their carbon tax, driving up costs on everything even more. Canadians know this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Now they see what that cost is. Across Canada, 30% of food bank users are children. In Saskatchewan, that number jumps to 39%. 39% are children. The SPNDP loved the carbon tax and voted to keep it 24 times. The results? Taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. Canadians want and deserve a carbon tax election so they can kick these champagne socialists to the curb.
The honourable member from Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow is National Housing Day. The City of Richmond Hill and my great riding of Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill, received a...
Could I ask all members, please, to keep their voices down so that we can hear the statements from members? It's the honourable member from Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill, from the top, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow is National Housing Day. The City of Richmond Hill and my great riding of Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill, received a $31 million investment through the Housing Accelerator Fund. I advocated for this as their MP because they had presented an ambitious housing plan backed by a solid record. Mayor David West calls this funding essential to remove barriers and empower builders to create the housing Richmond Hill needs. But now, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition says he would cut this vital program as part of his so-called housing plan, a plan that benefits those who could already afford to buy a home and the developers building new homes. It provides no support to municipalities to ensure that builders can and will build the homes that are needed. He has even barred his MPs from advocating for housing funds for their ridings. This is reprehensible. Our most important role as MPs is to represent our constituents and
All right, we are still on statements by members. Question period should begin any minute now. Yes, they are the Libranos, aren't they?
MPs to stand up to your leader. Advocate for your ridings and help your municipalities get the support they need to provide the housing your constituents need. Thank you.
The honourable member from Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, I'm rising today to recognize the incredible work of members of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers and to echo two of their calls to action. I met with IBEW Local 230 and they oppose the government's decision to end the apprenticeship incentive and completion grants. They are set to expire in March, while apprentices across the country are facing rising costs. Without this support, housing and infrastructure projects could face delays as these workers do vital work across Canada. IBEW is also urging the federal government to increase all student bursaries, which have remained stagnant for almost 25 years. Apprentices are the lowest paid blue-collar workers, yet their overall value and impact on the Canadian economy is monumental. To secure Canada's future and skilled labor force, we must remove barriers and invest in workers today.
The Honourable Member for La Pointe-de-l'Île. Mr. Speaker, I rise to pay tribute to Francine Lalonde. The Belvedere in Pointe-aux-Trembles has been renamed and now bears her name. Francine Lalonde was the first female vice president of the CSN. She then served as Minister for the Status of Women under René Lévesque. She continued her career as Bloc Québécois MP for my riding, La Pointe-de-l'Île, from 1993 to 2011. As foreign affairs critic, she promoted Quebec and its independence at home and abroad. Among other things, she took up the cause of Nathalie Morin, who was kidnapped in Saudi Arabia by her husband. She also took up the cause of Omar Khadr. Her dedication to championing causes such as dying with dignity speaks to her great compassion. Thank you to the City of Montreal for allowing the Belvedere to be named after Francine Lalonde to become a symbol of the legacy she left for Quebec and for La Pointe-de-l'Île. Thank you, Francine Lalonde. We will never forget you.
The honourable member from Tobique-Mactaquac.
Mr. Speaker, I have an announcement. This NDP Liberal coalition are renewing their vows after a brief 2.5-month breakup. Their irreconcilable differences have been reconciled by their shared love of pensions and power. We all may love the warm, happily ever after hallmark homecoming feel that a reconciled relationship can bring. But while this renewal of vows may be restoring their fanciful hopes of returning power and retaining power, it is leaving Canadians feeling cold and rejected. While they're rekindling their old flame and catching up, Canadians are fed up and won't be fooled again. At this soon-to-be renewal of vows ceremony, when the proverbial question is asked, can anyone show any just cause why they may not lawfully be reunited in marriage, we will all join with Canadians and say yes, and demand an immediate carbon tax election where they will get to choose between a hypocritical high carbon and high-flying honeymooning coalition government of the far left and a common-sense conservative government that will axe the tax, build the homes.
Oh my goodness, he's going all in. Holy. The energy behind that guy.
Order, please. Order, please. Order, please.
Colleagues.
The honourable member from Cambridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Liberal government is committed to building more homes faster through the Housing Accelerator Fund. We've signed over 175 agreements to fast-track the construction of over 750,000 new homes across Canada. In my riding of Cambridge, we're receiving $13.3 million to implement 9 local initiatives, including the fast-tracking of municipal lands programs, which will spur over 3,600 new homes. These initiatives will also increase affordable housing by removing the barriers and streamlining the zoning process. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition's plan to cut is a disaster. He must stop muzzling Conservative MPs who are simply doing their job, Mr. Speaker, advocating for their communities. Mayors, housing experts, and even 18 of his own members of Parliament oppose this plan to cut. I urge him to support our Liberal plan. We need to continue to build homes faster, Mr. Speaker, across Canada for all Canadians.
Before we continue with question period, I'd just like to point out to members that the chair was generous with many members from all parties today who had gone over their 60 seconds. Just so that we could start on time, I'm going to ask all members to be mindful to try to get their declarations within 60 seconds so we can start right away. The honourable member from Kamloops, Caribou Thompson.
Mr. Speaker, violent criminals first, victims second. That is the Prime Minister's motto. Sexual psychopaths like Paul Bernardo and Terry Lynn McClintock get to play tennis and live comfortably in lower security while victims serve psychological life sentences. This happened because of Bill C-83, the Prime Minister saying that everybody in jail should be at the lowest security possible. This begs the question, why does the Prime Minister prefer criminals over victims?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, our colleague knows very well that's not the case. He knows that all members of this House should properly be concerned about victims of crime. I think all members of this House should also be judicious to continually repeat the names of Canada's most heinous criminals in this House. We think on this side, Mr. Speaker, that's also disrespectful for victims. These heinous criminals remain in federal prisons where they belong, and our government will always stand up for victims, including not repeating the names of heinous criminals over and over again in this House.
I'm going to ask the honourable member from Lakelands, please, to not participate unless they're recognized by the chair. The honourable member from Kamloops, Thompson Caribou.
I'll say a name, Tori Stafford. One of her relatives wrote to me about what that minister just said yesterday. He said something similarly insensitive. And if he were to read the note I got, I think he'd be on his feet withdrawing. Mr. Speaker, these NDP Liberals want to give a temporary tax trick while permanently raising the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. Here's the choice. The NDP Liberals want to remove the GST on a few things. Conservatives want to axe the carbon tax on everything permanently. Will this Prime Minister call a carbon tax election so we can axe the tax?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Speaker, today is a tremendous day in the House of Commons. Why? Because we're giving a tax break to Canadians so they can buy essential things. Groceries, snacks, kids' clothing, kids' boots, diapers, all tax-free. That means starting on December 14th, buying beer or wine wine to enjoy with your friends or family, going to a restaurant, grabbing some takeout, all tax-free for the holidays. The best question that Conservative member can ask his leader is whether this time he'll be unmuzzled and unleashed to actually vote for an affordability measure in this chamber.
That actually scares me that there's going to be no tax on stuff, because where are they going to try and get that money from later?
Nothing more than the arsonist pouring more inflationary fuel on the fire. Just this last May, the Prime Minister said this: you send out more cash, quote, inflation goes up by exactly that amount, end quote. Here's our common sense solution: axe a tax for everyone, forever. Cheaper gas, groceries, home heating, and everything that's shipped. Now that's a Christmas present everybody wants. So will the NDP Liberals call an election so we can axe the tax?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
I'm delighted to hear the member opposite talking about Christmas, because that's what we should be talking about, having a festive season. His leader, unfortunately, was talking about trickery. I thought he was still stuck in Halloween mode. But here we are talking about the festive season and what we're going to do to make it better for Canadians. We're going to ensure that the toys they buy their children are GST-free. We're going to ensure the Christmas tree they put up in their home to gather around is also tax-free. That's something that I would think every member of this chamber should get behind. But yet, to date, just to this point, we have no idea whether the Conservatives will actually support an affordability measure that helps Canadians for Christmas. Will they?
The honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, Quebecers are not naive. After 9 minister of this Prime Minister, prices are up, rents are up by 33%, as are mortgages. The Prime Minister knows full well that this temporary GST break won't do anything in terms of affordability. Quebecers want permanent relief, and this is why they want a new Conservative government. When will he trigger an election to make life more affordable for all Canadians forever? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, it's a great day for Quebecers and Canadians, Mr. Speaker. Today, Canadians have understood that their Liberal government is here for them. The first thing that Canadians said to us, Mr. Speaker, is about affordability. And this is what we're presenting today: a GST break on everyday items that family use. And we will be here to help workers. But the real question for people watching us at home today: is the Conservative leader going to allow these members to help Canadians, yes or no? That's the real question in the minds of Canadians. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister, supported by the Bloc, kept in place by the NDP, is just tricking people. He's sending them more benefits, but inflation is going up for around the same amount. After this period, these rebates will disappear and everything will go back to normal. When will the PM trigger an election to cut taxes forever? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, we don't need an election for this. We already did this for Canadians. The answer is clear, Mr. Speaker. On that side of the House, you have the Conservatives that are obstructing systematically the House. And, Mr. Speaker, Canadians, we'll see if they have the guts to stand up for Canadians, because what we're proposing today is a measure for affordability, helping people in need at Christmas, to help workers in the spring. Mr. Speaker, will the Conservatives have the heart to help Canadians once and for all? Before the honourable member for La Prairie rises to speak, I'd just like to remind everyone, I think the member for New Westminster Burnaby shouldn't take the floor without being recognized by the chair. Thank you. The honourable member for La Prairie. The last report from Quebec's French language commissioner was made public yesterday. French continues to regress, and not surprisingly, the commissioner accuses Ottawa of contributing to its decline. Go to any federal department in Quebec, and you'll hear the language of work isn't French for the federal government. Ottawa gives bilingual jobs to unilingual Anglophones. Ottawa ignores its obligations to translate documents into French, and at the end of the day, Ottawa doesn't give a damn about French. Well, when Ottawa doesn't respect French, it's all of Quebec that doesn't respect it. Does he understand that? The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his question. As the new Minister of Official Languages, I'm looking forward to working with the Quebec government. Protecting and promoting our both official languages is an absolute priority for our government. And that is why we implemented C-13, and we did make historical investment in an action plan, $1.3 billion over 5 years. Mr. Speaker, our priority is always on official languages, and I'd be looking forward to working with my counterparts. Thank you. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. The French Language Commissioner recommends that the Quebec government question the Government of Canada about the effects of its activities on the status of French in the Gatineau region. This means that Quebec must intervene and tell Ottawa to stop anglicizing Gatineau and stop anglicizing Quebec. This government is hurting French, its future, it's hurting the Quebec nation, its identity, it's harming Quebec. When are they going to stop hitting us over the head, hitting our language, and start respecting Quebec's common language, French? The Honourable Minister of Veterans and Official Languages. Mr. Speaker, I'm offended to hear my honourable colleague say that there are minority settings in New Brunswick that is hampering the promotion of French in this country. I don't agree. I'm proud to be part of a government that has made historical investment in official languages, and I'll continue to work with the province of Quebec to make sure that the necessary investments will be made. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Rosemount-La Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, for weeks now, the NDP has been putting pressure on the government to give people a break who are having a hard time paying their bills. We proposed a plan to remove the GST from essential products. The Liberals gave in to this pressure, but as usual, they only did things by halves. We won on groceries and children's clothing, but only for 2 months. The needs won't disappear in February. Do the Liberals understand that this assistance must be extended and made permanent for families who are struggling? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, the NDP is just waking up. It's Christmas time, and now they're waking up. But we have understood for quite some time that the main concern for Canadians is affordability. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, that today we're presenting a strong measure, a measure that will help families. Why? Because at Christmas time, that's when they really need a hand. They have needs for children, for groceries, and for restaurants. On the side of the House, the Liberals will always fight for affordability, will always stand up for families, and be here to say yes to Canadians in need.
The Honourable Member from Vancouver Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians need relief. While CEOs are raking in billions in profits, families are getting gouged on things like their heating, cell phone bills, and at the grocery store. Now, the NDP has called on the Liberals to remove the GST on life essentials to give Canadians a break. Instead, this government responded with a partial version of what the NDP proposed. Liberals let people down, Conservatives want cuts. Why won't the Liberals give Canadians a real break by permanently removing the GST on life's essentials?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board, Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, it's tax-free on essential goods for the holidays. That's great news for Canadians, Mr. Speaker. Also supports for Canadian workers, 18 million Canadian workers getting cash back, Mr. Speaker. More good news for Canadians. On this side of the House, we're fighting for affordability measures. On the
Oh my God, her voice might be worse than Chrystia Freeland. I think we just have the person right here just took the cherry on top of the cake. Oh my God, man. Holy, my ears are bleeding.
The Honourable Member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
Hide your wallets. This Liberal NDP costly coalition is back to break the bank. After doubling housing costs, doubling the national debt, and doubling food bank usage, they want to quadruple the carbon tax scam. The leader of the NDP is too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to Liberal interests to fight for the people. That's why he's willing to keep this corrupt Liberal government in power, because he has pension tension. Why not give Canadians real relief? Call a carbon tax election now, so common sense Conservatives can axe the tax for good.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government is giving a tax break to all Canadians. That means that there's not going to be GST, Mr. Speaker, on essential goods, on everyday goods, Mr. Speaker, like groceries, like toys for the holidays, like kids' clothing, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we know that Canadians are looking forward to this tax break. We know that it is done responsibly. It'll be done for 2 months, Mr. Speaker. The question on everybody's mind is that Conservative member checked with his leader to see if he'll be able to vote for a tax break, or maybe the leader won't let him do that. No holds barred.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
Instead of a temporary inflationary pause, why don't we give Canadians a real break? Call a carbon tax election now, so Canadians can send this costly coalition on a permanent holiday. Because a common sense Conservative government will axe the tax on gas, groceries, and home heating and bring home lower prices and powerful paychecks. Let's do it. Let's call a carbon tax election, so common sense Conservatives can axe the tax on everything for everyone for good.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, this week the media reported that the Conservative leader is preventing the members of Parliament from the Conservative Party of advocating for their citizens, of advocating for housing investments, Mr. Speaker. Well, this Liberal government is there for Canadians. We are instituting a tax holiday, Mr. Speaker, a tax break for Canadians when they need it most. The question on everybody's mind is, are Conservative members going to be allowed to represent their communities, allowed to represent vulnerable Canadians, and vote in favor of a tax break, or are they going to need to follow their Conservative leader?
And ask members again to not take the floor when they're not recognized. And I've asked a member from
what did you just say, Greg?
South Shore St. Margaret's on several occasions this week, and I'm also asked a member from Calgary Signal Hill, please, not to take the floor.
Like, I know I stutter sometimes, but my goodness.
Coming from the Honourable Member from Northumberland, Peter. Excuse me, I'm going to ask ministers, please, to keep colleagues.
Colleagues, please.
The Honourable Member from Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Well, Canadians don't have to wonder anymore. The Cost of Living Crisis Coalition, well, they never really left us. Just a few months ago, though, it was the NDP leader who said these Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. I couldn't agree more, Mr. Speaker, but today he flip-flopped. He announced his full confidence in this Liberal Prime Minister. If this coalition is so sure of themselves, their poverty-inducing agenda, why not go ahead, go to Canadians, and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Let me get this straight. The Conservative members of Parliament talk about reducing poverty and talk about helping Canadians through affordability challenges, but when we have a real thing on the table that's going to cut the GST on essential goods, they have to listen to their leader and oppose cutting taxes for Canadians. But, Mr. Speaker, this is just par for the course for the Conservatives. We know that the supposed guy that fights for freedom of speech doesn't want his MPs to speak freely. The real question is will he allow them to freely vote for Canadians and this tax cut? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, how can Canadians be reasonably expected to see that a costly coalition that got us into this economic quagmire could possibly see the way out? This Prime Minister has increased food costs by 35%. He's increased the cost of gasoline by over 50%. He's increased the cost of mortgage and housing by over 70%. Simple question, when will this Prime Minister allow for real chance, real opportunity, real hope by calling a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
A GST being removed on essential goods for the next couple of months, and the Conservatives want to vote against that. As we go into the holidays and families are thinking about buying toys and getting Christmas trees, and we are offering...
Her eyes just keep getting wider as she continues to speak.
The Conservatives say no.
It's kind of scary.
Don't stand up for Canadians. Don't help them through these tough times. Mr. Speaker, that's just par for the course and a pattern of behavior. And when you look in the dictionary, it actually starts with an H and ends with an hypocrisy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Whoa! Big words coming from the crocodile lady.
The Honourable Member for Levis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, while the Liberals removed the GST on beer and wine for the holiday season, hoping to make people forget how bad they are, Canada's food banks don't have time to celebrate.
That's exactly it. They just want you to get hammered over the holiday season so you can forget.
Mr. Speaker, does the Liberal government understand that Canadians want permanent tax cuts and not just for the holiday season? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We are granting a tax break on groceries, on children's toys, Mr. Speaker, on children's clothing. This means that as of December 14th, a restaurant or a wine or a bottle amongst friends will be free of GST. This Conservative member, which is rising today, did he check with his Conservative leader? Is he allowed to vote in favour of this measure, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Member for Levis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, child poverty has increased in 97% of ridings across the country. It's now 1 in 5 children living in poverty under this Liberal government. Instead of inviting us to have a glass of beer, here's a common sense solution to help families. Abolish the carbon tax for everyone, forever. This means cheaper gas, cheaper groceries, and cheaper heating during our Liberal winters. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister call an election now? The Honourable Minister of Families, Children and Social Development.
For Mr. Speaker is a tax break through the winter, through the holidays for Canadians across the country. I had the chance this morning to talk with a dad in my riding, Chris, who told me how much this is going to save him on diapers, Mr. Speaker. The basics that families need day in and day out. We're moving forward with a tax holiday to support them in these expensive times. I think the question that members should be asking is, will their leader allow them to support this for Canadians?
The Honourable Member for Avignon, La Matisse-Matane-Matapédia. At a time when the federal government is being asked to increase its border staffing levels in preparation for a new wave of migration, it comes as a shock to learn that Ottawa is reducing its service hours at boarding crossings. On Tuesday, the Border Service Officers Union also expressed concern, saying at a time when all eyes are on the border, the agency is showing a blatant lack of vision in proceeding with this service reduction. To claim that the border is safer if crossings are closed more often is simply nonsense. Mr. Speaker, what does this minister have to say to concerned border services officers? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, for several months now, even more than a year, we have been working with U.S. authorities to find the best way to harmonize hours at some border crossings, some of the secondary ones. This will do two things, Mr. Speaker. This will, in the case of someone who comes to the Canadian border and who does not have the right to access Canada, they have the right to go back to a U.S. border open, which will be open, and this will allow the government to reassign agents to other crossings. The Honourable Member for Avignon, La Matisse-Matane-Matapédia. It sends a very bad message to cut hours at border crossings, except for the smugglers. It suggests that the border could be even less watertight than it is today. The message Ottawa should be sending is to deploy resources in support of agents and the RCMP. Tracking smugglers at the longest land border is a game of cat and mouse, and when the cat's away, the mice will play. When Quebec sends the Quebec police to take over border management from the federal government, is it really time to cut back on border services? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, it's the time to support our RCMP and services and border services to work with. We've always done with authorities, with police in Quebec. It's a joint effort between Canada's law enforcement and our U.S. partners, and that's exactly what our government has done since the beginning. We are going to reverse the conservative cuts with respect to the RCMP and border services, and we're going to continue to invest more to ensure that they have the necessary resources to do their important work. The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Loire. Citizens living on the border in Salaberry-sur-Loire and in Châteauguay-Lacolle all know that smugglers are already one step ahead of the federal government. Since Trump's return, people are even more worried. The cuts in hours at CBSA does nothing to reassure citizens, and at the time when the RCMP must double its efforts and the federal government is being asked to support it, does this government realize how contradictory and worrisome it is to see border crossings reducing their services? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, what is not contradictory is to work with our American counterparts, like we've always done, to support the RCMP and the people who work at CBSA so that they can do that work that Canadians expect of them. And this is exactly what we are doing. I'd like to reassure my colleague if
Big jam roll. That woman always looks like she's fallen asleep. She looks like she never gets a good night's sleep ever. The block just consistently works her to the bone.
Emergency
or she just drinks a lot
at other border crossings.
The NDP leader said the Liberals were too weak, too selfish, too beholden to corporate interest to fight for Canadians. But it only took him 2 months to renege on his word, reaffirm his commitment to the Prime Minister and his costly coalition, and keep Canadians in carbon tax hell. Today he reaffirmed that he is committed and showed his confidence in this Prime Minister in quadrupling the carbon tax on farmers, on food, and fuel. How about a common sense solution? Axe the carbon tax on everything, for everyone, forever. Will the Prime Minister Canadians and call it carbon tax election?
Oh, they cut him off there for a second. Okay.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, we are delivering real relief for Canadians, and it is the Conservatives who are trying to now make life more expensive when they have an opportunity to help Canadians with the high cost of living. But this is unsurprising, Mr. Speaker, because it's from the same party whose leader was delivering donuts to people out here who were protesting, and yet this morning had protesters removed by police from his home, Mr. Speaker. The guy who cares about freedom of speech certainly doesn't like it when people oppose his views. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, it's about to get real rowdy. They are shouting back and forth at one another right now. If you take a look down here. Those were some fighting words from Karina. And Greg just muted the House of Commons. I knew it was coming. He was waving his fingers around like Harry Potter does with his wand. And here we have it, ladies and gentlemen. No sound. The dictator. Fred. I was about to call him Fred Gungus. Yeah, sure, we could call him Fred Gungus. Muting the House of Commons. Greg Fungus muting so the taxpayers cannot hear what is going on. Classic move by Fred Gungus. or Greg Fungus, or Greg Fergus. I don't even know his name anymore. Darth Fergus.
The honourable member from Foothills.
Mr. Speaker, it's not good when protesters go to anyone's house, not just the leader of the opposition.
I like how Barrett just keeps saying shameful over and over again. Oh, Greg's gonna mute it again. He's totally gonna do it. Just watch Greg's hands when they start waving around. Oh, see, there you go. There you go. Emperor Greg. Controlling the CPAC audio. What a disgrace indeed. Gungus gone. Yes, Darth Freg Gungus. This is wild. This is wild. Oh my god, man. This is exactly why there is a petition out right now to stop Darth Gungus from muting the House.
At a time when 2 million Canadians are forced to a food bank in a single month, when food inflation in Canada is 36% higher than it is in the United States, and a quarter of Canadians are going, 25% of children are going to school hungry, the House Leader of the Liberal government is making this a partisan thing about protesters at the Leader's house, when they should be disgusted that protesters are going to any house of any member of Parliament. I would hope she'll stand up and apologize for those comments.
Oh! Greg is gonna mute the mic again. Probably not. Oh, I say probably not, but just wait for it. Just watch his hands. It's getting rowdy here at the ending of question period. We've got about like 20 minutes left.
Colleagues, the honourable leader of the government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, I'm actually really glad to hear that from my honourable colleague, because no protester should be in front of anyone's house, except when the convoy was here, they cheered them on in front of so many residents in Ottawa.
Exactly,
and
in my residence.
They cheered on
My residence.
who prevented them from going to the hospital, who prevented them from going to the grocery store, who prevented them from ambulances arriving at their homes. Mr. Speaker, there is a double standard on that side of the house.
Whoa! Whoa! I have never seen her raise her voice ever. Ever. I could actually hear what she was saying. She has gone ballistic, like Russia with the ICBM, and Fungus has just muted the House of Commons for the third time in a row. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are joining right now, it is getting wild. Karina is unhinged.
Going on, there's a crisis that exists in Canada.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
That's not nice.
Member from St. Albert, Edmonton,
Whoa.
please control himself in this place.
What did he say?
Outside of this
What did he say?
I'm going to invite the honourable member from Cumberland. Everyone, relax. The honourable member from Cumberland Colchester will start again.
Wild.
Mr. Speaker, despite the messy split in September, it looks like Canada's NDP Liberal woke power couple has gotten back together again. And they're coming for Canadian hard-earned money. Canadians are not fooled by their temporary tax trickery. 53% more Nova Scotians are using food banks than 5 years ago. Almost 40,000 Nova Scotians are visiting food banks every month, and 12,000 of them are children. Here's a better and common sense solution. Axe the carbon tax on everything for everyone forever. Cheaper gas, groceries, and home heating, and everything that's shipped. Will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election?
I swear she went full Justin Trudeau there with the hand pointing and the yelling and everything.
Mr. Speaker, if that member and any of the members of the Conservative Party of Canada actually cared about affordability for Canadians, they would support this measure to remove the GST on essential items that we are putting forward that is going to help Canadians over the coming months get through these challenging times. But, Mr. Speaker, this is a pattern of behavior. They say one thing, they do another, whether that is with regards to supporting Canadians through affordability challenges, muzzling their members of parliament who try to speak up on behalf of their constituents, or taking away, removing protesters by police that don't agree with them. Mr. Speaker, they are completely disrespectful to Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, this morning the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu, the former Minister Gallant, and Hamas leader Deif for crimes against humanity and war crimes. Palestinian and Israeli civilians have faced horrific violence at the hands of the Netanyahu government and Hamas. Unlike many other ICC countries, this Prime Minister has not been clear, and Canadians deserve an answer. Will the government enforce these arrest warrants and ensure that the victims of these war crimes see the justice that they deserve?
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We respect the independence of the International Criminal Court. We will abide by all the regulations and rulings of the International Criminal Court. That is just who we are as Canadians. But let me be clear, all parties must abide by international law. We also know that an immediate ceasefire is urgently needed. Hostages must be released, Hamas must lay down its arms, more aid must get into Gaza, and the violence must stop. Thank you, Mr.
And what steps have you guys taken to do literally any of that? Because all you do is repeat those same phrases over and over again.
Mr. Speaker, we may have another price-fixing scandal in Canada. This time it's not bread but potatoes. Allegedly, two of Canada's big food companies have been colluding together to jack up the price of frozen potato products. Costs of these products have shot up by 40% over the last 2 years. CEOs jacked up the prices and gouged Canadians. Liberals are letting families down while Conservatives cater to these CEOs who fund their election campaigns. Will the Liberals investigate this potential price-fixing French fry gate by greedy CEOs?
French fry gate? Oh my god, they're just making stuff up now, aren't they?
Mr. Speaker, we'll take no lessons from the NDP on that, Mr. Speaker. In fact, it was a Liberal government, Mr. Speaker, that reformed the Competition Act in this country. Now, Mr. Speaker, thanks to our government, consumers at home know that we're going to have their back, Mr. Speaker. We have given new powers to the Competition Commissioner to investigate. We expect him to use all his power and to make sure that we restore competition in this country at every single time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that the last couple of years have been particularly challenging, and although inflation is continuing to come down, households haven't particularly started to feel that. That is why we introduced very important measures today to provide relief to Canadians. It is yet to be seen whether or not the Conservative leader will allow his MPs to vote in favour of what is so important for their constituents. We do know that he prevented them from talking about housing money and also from continually muzzling them from representing their communities. I'm wondering if the President of the Treasury Board can help inform Conservatives why it's so important to vote in favour of this legislation.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, diapers, groceries, prepared meals, essential goods, what do these things have in common? They're all tax-free for the holidays, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, okay, I'm just gonna do us all a favor and mute that because her voice, man, is actually like nails on a chalkboard. I'm not saying I have the most fantastic voice either, but oh my god, man. It is brutal. She is actually worse than Chrystia Freeland. I think she truly is.
Every day is a great day to fight for Canadians.
The honourable member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
The Liberals are trying to hide from Canadians that the company owned by the disgraced Liberal from Edmonton Centre is still eligible to get government contracts. Now, the Prime Minister may believe that his former and failed employment minister is the victim, but the real victims, of course, are Indigenous people and the people defrauded by his company. So to this point, the Prime Minister has failed to ban global health imports from bidding on contracts with the Government of Canada. Will he stand up and ban them today?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have been very clear in this House that that company was not on the list, and Indigenous procurement is for Indigenous people. But, Mr. Speaker, this is an attempt by the Conservative members of Parliament to distract from what is
And she goes back to not being able to hear her at all.
today.
Her voice is just like a whisper.
To give a break on GST for essential goods over the coming months, and we are going to support 18.6 million Canadians with a Canada Working Benefit.
This is how she normally speaks. She normally always talks like this. She was unhinged earlier. It was insane. Like I said, I have never seen her lash out like that.
So let's get this straight. The disgraced former minister, the member for Edmonton Centre, a Liberal, started a pandemic profiteering business, and that business lied about being Indigenous to get government contracts. They're under investigation by the Edmonton Police Service for fraud, and this Liberal government is still allowing them to bid on government contracts. Now, they're saying they're not on the list for approved Indigenous-owned businesses. But what about for any other type of contract? Why is this Prime Minister determined to protect Liberal insiders, and why won't he ban his disgraced former minister from having these contracts?
Greg does have mutapause. That was a good one.
House comments.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I said, that company is not on the list for Indigenous procurement. But yet again, Mr. Speaker, what we see from the Conservatives opposite is they don't want to talk about the important affordability measures that we have presented today. They don't want to talk about the fact that they are going to vote against and oppose a GST break for millions of Canadians when it comes to essential goods. They don't want to talk about the fact that they are going to oppose a $250 benefit for working Canadians, Mr. Speaker. They're just not there for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, this government says that they support women's equality and reconciliation, but their actions show anything but. This Prime Minister was very quick to fire the first female Indigenous Minister of Justice because she wasn't willing to lie for him. Yet it took him weeks to fire a Minister of Employment, a white male, who faked his Indigenous identity. So why was it so easy to fire one but not the other?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, what's so encouraging, and I would say it's not often that I find something encouraging from the Conservative Party, but what is encouraging to hear is their staunch support for Indigenous procurement. And I agree with the Conservative Party. We have to work hard to make sure that Indigenous businesses are the ones that actually profit from Indigenous priorities. And so I want to thank the Conservative Party for keeping their eye on making sure that this country ensures Indigenous economic success. We'll do that together.
The Honourable Minister, the Honourable Member from Calgary.
The Honourable Minister.
To err is human. The Honourable Minister.
Oh, Greg. Oh, Greg. Oh, Greg. Yeah, silly goose.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, this is not real reconciliation. It took weeks for this Prime Minister to fire the Minister of Employment, to allow him to resign. Real reconciliation, according to the former Minister of Justice, would have been to fire that Minister of Employment immediately. She says she's left to watch white people play ancestry Wheel of Fortune. She says it's shameful and it's destructive. So why did it take the Prime Minister so long to fire the Minister of Employment when it was so easy to fire a real female Indigenous minister?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous...
Great, Mr. Speaker. I see so many questions on Indigenous priorities in this House, and I want to thank the member opposite and hope that she will work with her party to ensure the safe passage of Bill C-61, a Clean Drinking Water Act for First Nations has been co-developed with First Nations in this country. Mr. Speaker, there are many opportunities that the party opposite can support Indigenous priorities, and that's certainly one of them.
The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Back to the fraud at CRA. Yesterday in committee, the minister went on the attack, but get this, not against fraudsters, against whistleblowers. It's crazy. She joined in CRA's witch hunt against its own employees. But without them, we would never have known taxpayers were robbed of over $100 million this year. Without them, we would have never known that CRA had hidden 30,000 cases of personal information theft from the Privacy Commissioner. Without them, we never would have known, because CRA was covering it all up. Why is the minister an accomplice in the attack on whistleblowers?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Revenue.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker.
Must be denounced, and I have to say that our minister and our government has supported Bill C-290 from that party's private members bill. There are situations where we are not able to talk about issues, specifically with respect to Section 241 in the Income Tax Act. But there are obligations and there are ways in which we are able to have whistleblowers report what they need to within the CRA, and we are constantly working on these issues. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. If we need whistleblowers, it's because this government never does anything until their problems make the headlines. It's thanks to whistleblowers that we know about the fraud at CRA, which the agency's been hiding at every opportunity. It's thanks to whistleblowers we know about the extent of foreign interference. It's thanks to whistleblowers there was a crackdown on sexual misconduct in the military that a Liberal minister swept under the rug. The problem isn't whistleblowers, it's Liberals hiding information. It's in their DNA. Will the minister stop attacking whistleblowers and start going after the fraudsters? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I think that the challenge here is whistleblowers. As I said earlier, there are ways within the CRA that people are able to report whatever misconduct that they see within the CRA. But I think the question really is, how do we protect whistleblowers? We have obviously supported Bill C-290 from the Bloc Québécois. I wonder if we can support the Conservative Party and their whistleblowing situation that's going on right now.
The Honourable Member from Battle River, Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the disgraced Liberal MP from Edmonton Centre resigned from Cabinet, but as of today, his shady company GHI is still eligible to bid on government contracts, despite the member admitting that he lied about his heritage to get dollars earmarked for Indigenous businesses in the past. That's on top of being embroiled in conflicts of interest and even allegations of being connected with international drug busts. The government House Leader still has not made clear whether or not that company has been banned from bidding on contracts with the government. Can she give a straight answer here today?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is clear is that the company in question was not listed as an Indigenous company. What is clear is that the company never received a contract as an Indigenous company. And Mr. Speaker, we have taken many steps going forward to provide for modernization of procurement and transparency and openness, and we're working towards supporting Canadians and supporting the Indigenous community who require our support, and we'll be there for them all the way through. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, you've had 10 years to do that.
Sturgeon River, Parkland.
Mr. Speaker, what do 5 Range Rovers, 2 Porsche Cayennes, a post office box co-owned by a suspected drug trafficker, a warehouse full of medical supplies destroyed by
Cocaine
arson,
Randy.
millions of dollars in fraud, and a company falsely claiming to be Indigenous all have in common? The Liberal member for Edmonton Centre. Now, the Prime Minister continues to stand by his MP. He sees nothing wrong with these scandals. It begs the question, if all this corruption and scandal isn't enough to fire a minister, how corrupt do you need to be to get fired by this Prime Minister?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, that question has been answered. One question that I have is how far the Conservatives are going to go. Conservative leader wants to take away $10 a day childcare from Canadian mothers. He wants to take away dental care subsidies from our seniors. He wants to take away 750,000 new construction bills from Canadians who want to buy their first home, Mr. Speaker. Now the newest policy of the Conservative leader is to take away the tax break that the Liberal government announced today for all Canadians. When is it going to end, Mr. Speaker? Under this Conservative leader, he's going to make life more expensive.
The Honourable Member from Sturgeon River, Parkland.
Well, Mr. Speaker, now that the Prime Minister's minister in charge of Jasper's recovery has resigned under a cloud of suspicion, who's going to oversee the rebuilding of this beautiful community? Will it be the radical Environment Minister, who ignored warnings for years from forestry experts that the dead forest around Jasper was a powder keg waiting to blow? Will the Prime Minister assure Canadians that he won't put the radical minister who failed the community by allowing it to burn in the first place in charge of Jasper and towns like it again?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
This member should be ashamed of the previous government's record in the protection of Jasper, Mr. Speaker. Do you know how much they invested in 2011 for fire protection in Jasper? Zero. Do you know how much they invested in 2012? Zero. Do you know how much they invested in 2013? Zero. 2014? Zero. 2015? Zero. We've invested more than $60 million in fire prevention in Jasper. They did absolutely nothing.
Whoa, that was unhinged as well. What is going on over there today? They got into the loony juice.
Order!
And Jasper was an absolute disaster. An absolute nightmare.
Which roof were you on?
Order!
We're climbing on the Premier's roof in 2011. No, 2006.
The Honourable Member for Mississauga East, Cooksville.
Well, Mr. Speaker, while the leader of the opposition silences and strong-arms his caucus into being his mouthpiece in their communities, our government is listening to Canadians. What are our neighbors telling me, Mr. Speaker? That while inflation is easing, life can still be challenging. They've also told me that our government has been there to support them through difficult times, but they're worried about the added costs of the upcoming holiday season. So, Mr. Speaker, could the Minister of Justice, the Attorney General, please tell us what our government is doing to put more money in the pockets of Canadians?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Wow, clearly nobody backed him there.
Question. We are starting off the new year on the right foot. Today we announced we are giving all Canadians a tax break by exempting the GST and HST on things Canadians care about so they can buy essentials like groceries, snacks, and kids' clothing tax-free. We're also introducing the Working Canadians rebate, which will put $250 directly back into the pockets of working Canadians, 18 million plus working Canadians. The question for this chamber is, will the members opposite have the courage to stand up to their leader, to free themselves from this gag order that he's imposed upon them and come out in favor of the tax break?
And I ask the Honourable Member from New Westminster Burnaby for the second time today to please not take the floor when not recognized by the chair.
Yeah, he's the Minister of Justice and all that, and he's sitting there talking about tax breaks.
Mr. Speaker, the Journal de Montréal newspaper reported this morning that a woman on Montreal's North Shore had her car stolen twice, and to add insult to injury, her insurance premiums went up over $7,000 a year. What's more, she was required to install the tag tracking system or she would have been denied coverage. Once again, it's the victims who end up paying for the Prime Minister's incompetence. His inaction on public safety speaks louder than his long, boring speeches on the subject. When will he wake up? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, we are concerned, like all members here, when we hear stories like that. And that's precisely why we've been working with the police, whether it's the Montreal Police, the Quebec Provincial Police, or other police forces in Quebec or other provinces. We've transferred hundreds of millions of dollars to support this important work. We increased funding for the RCMP, for staff, and we will continue to fight circumstances that are wholly unacceptable, like the ones my colleague just described. The Honourable Member. Well, to add to that, we learned this morning, for the second time in 24 hours, car thieves deliberately drove into the police who were trying to stop them in Montreal's Côte-des-Neiges area. One of the three criminals, Abdurrahman Tabyad Ali, was already awaiting trial on 3 separate cases for vehicle theft, accessory after the fact, forcible confinement, armed assault, robbery, breaking and entering, and death threats. How many women have to be assaulted or how many police officers killed before the Prime Minister cracks down on these criminals? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General. I'd like to thank the member for the question, not just for the opportunity to point out the facts, but also to say that what we've seen in Quebec with CBSA is a decrease of car thefts in Quebec by 48%. What the member opposite raises is important because it has to do with the administration of justice provincially by Quebec's courts. Do we have enough police officers? Do we have enough justices of the peace in the right place? Do we have room in jails? Those are important questions that should be asked of Mr. Legault.
The honourable member from Coast of Bay Central Notre Dame.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 9 years, these NDP Liberals are not worth the cost, crime, and corruption. Last week, I attended a town hall on crime in Somerford, Notre Dame Bay, where the RCMP were also present. Residents told them that it's gotten so bad that they're sleeping with guns next to their beds. The RCMP basically said that their hands are tied by this Liberal, soft-on-crime justice system. So will the Prime Minister call an election and let the people have their say on whether his crime record is good or bad?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, the concerns about community safety are concerns that touch all of us in every community. What I would say with respect to the combat against gun violence in our communities right around this country is look at the Liberal record. What we've done is we've put a ban on assault rifles. What we've done is we put a freeze on handguns. Most importantly, we are investing on our borders to interdict the traffic of arms between different countries, particularly on our southern border. That's important for keeping Canadians safe, and that was in place of investments that have been cut by the previous government. That's the Liberal record. I would hope that the Conservatives will get behind basic community safety.
The Honourable Member for Dorval, Lachine, LaSalle. Mr. Speaker, this week we announced a major new investment to accelerate housing construction in Quebec. The Conservative leader has had a rough few weeks because of the scandal he caused with his plan to rip up this deal with Quebec. Can the Minister of Economic Development tell us more about how our government is helping to build more housing for Quebecers? Thank you very much. The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Economic Development for Quebec. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for that question. You know, the devil's in the detail. The Conservative leader's proposal hides some dangerous housing details, eliminating social and affordable housing in Quebec, muzzling members who advocate for their communities.
So I'd just like to point out that the Toronto Police Association themselves directly tweeted at Trudeau saying, "Criminals did not get your message. Our communities are experiencing a 45% increase in shootings and a 62% increase in gun-related homicides." So the Justice Minister likes to sit there and lie, consistently lie through his teeth, saying that they have fantastic policies that are keeping crime off the streets, while the Toronto Police Association earlier this year in October literally exposed the ever-living hell out of them. Whenever that guy speaks, do not believe a word he says, and it makes it even worse because he is a minister from Toronto. So you would think that he would have very close ties to the TPA, but once again, he just consistently lies through his teeth. He is an absolute idiot. Let's continue back to question period.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure and Communities.
Of course, Mr. Speaker, it is incumbent on all levels of government to do whatever they can to help all Canadians, including renters. On our side, what have we done? Lifted the GST costs on the construction of purpose-built rentals. Put forward for the first time in Canadian history a Renters' Bill of Rights to support renters, Mr. Speaker. We also see the need, and unfortunately we don't hear this from the NDP, for more supply. That's why we have cooperated with builders across the country. There's more to do, and we will do that work, Mr. Speaker. I know that the Conservatives will cut every single one of these initiatives. That much is clear, Mr. Speaker.
Here. The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On November 15th, the peace train
Oh my
pulled out of
God,
Vancouver
she sounds
Station,
hammered.
and a cross-country trip raising awareness for peace, disarmament, and peacekeeping has now arrived in Ottawa, and they've asked parliamentarians to press this government. Will we reestablish a Centre for Excellence for Peace and Justice that the Pearson Peace Centre used to be? Will we increase our involvement as a country in peacekeeping, in pressing for nuclear disarmament, and for God's sakes, will we give peace a chance?
The Honourable Minister for National Defence.
I want to thank the member from Saanich Gulf Islands for his strong advocacy and for this question. Canada has long been a proud and significant contributor to United Nations peace operations. Most recently, we pledged $85 million over 3 years in continued support of global peacekeeping and peace building. We've also extended and expanded the ELSI initiative to increase the participation of uniformed women in peacekeeping operations. We've renewed our commitment to provide tactical airlift support to UN peace operations, and we're exploring opportunities for Canadian contribution of a quick reaction force. Mr. Speaker, it has been a great source of pride for all Canadians that the Canadian Armed Forces have always answered the call for peacekeeping operations.
Alrighty.
And so comes to an end question period. I see a number of people, I'm assuming, rising on their feet.
Oh, let's see if the point of orders get crazy today.
Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Island, Vito Lakes.
Oh, maybe it was on.
This is where it got
Speaker,
interesting.
In the past, the chair has found that words that are used in this place that can be seen to incite violence have been deemed to be unparliamentary. Now, I want to provide context to you, Chair, and there was a protest that took place at the home of the Minister of Justice and Attorney General. And when that occurred, I said, protest government buildings and MP offices, absolutely, but the intended target of this demonstration is a family home. This time they stayed outside, but we shouldn't wait until masked thugs are emboldened. This scene is not acceptable. Mr. Speaker, it is never acceptable for people to attend the family homes, the residences of members of Parliament, where their spouses, partners, and children live. And today, during question period, the government House Leader used language that could be seen to incite this type of activity, specifically targeting the Leader of the Opposition. Speaker, I would ask that you counsel the government House Leader to withdraw her comments, to apologize, and to condemn the protest that occurred at the home of the Leader of the Opposition, where his wife and children are. Thank you.
I see that the order. I see that the Honourable Minister, Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons is rising on her feet on the same point of order. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I actually welcome those comments from the member opposite because, as I said in the second response, I agree with the Conservatives that members of Parliament's homes should not be protested. And I said all Canadians' homes should not be protested. And so I'm glad that we have found agreement in this place because I think we can all agree that no one should have to...
I hate to interrupt the Honourable Member, but I'm going to ask the Honourable Members from Mackenzie Peace River, please, not to take the floor. A member raised a point of order. Another member was responding. It is important that we hear what the Honourable Member says. I don't know if the Government House Leader has anything to finish before I stood up. I cannot see her. Does the Honourable Minister have anything else to add before I cut her off? Thank you. I thank members on this point, and I will review this matter. The honourable member from Oakville, North Burlington.
Mr. Speaker, during question period, the member for St. Albert Edmonton called you a political hack. The disrespect that the
run away! He's running away! He's running away! He's running away! Wow! He's running away, coward!
Oh, what is going on?
Order!
What an absolute circus.
As I just asked members to do before, to listen carefully to points of order and to the responses. The Honourable Member from Oakville, North Burlington.
I obviously hit a nerve, Mr. Speaker. The disrespect that this shows, the disrespect that the party opposite has shown to Parliament and to the office of the Speaker is unparliamentary. It's just.
She looks like she should be working at a blackjack table.
Mr. Speaker, if you could ask him to apologize and withdraw the unparliamentary comment that he made in the House.
I thank the Honourable Member for raising this point, and as with the other point, I will take this under advisement. It being 3:25, the House will now proceed to the taking of deferred recorded division on the sub-amendment of Ms.
Alrighty, everybody. Thank you for joining. I thought it was going to get a little more crazy at the end there, but it clearly did not. The other day was wild when Freg, I called him Freg again, when Greg Fergus was just booting everybody out. Darth Freg Gungus. Once again, thank you all for joining. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day or night, depending on where you are from. Question period will be back next week on Monday. I typically don't cover Fridays as nobody shows up on Friday. Typical political MPs at their finest. Not doing their job. Alrighty. Hopefully, like I said, you all have a great rest of your day or night. Be safe. Yes. Take care. Bye-bye.